say that it feels right.
What's up, YouTube? It's the Blender, and today I wanted to go over my probably last video game for the Tainted Grail for just a little bit, right? Dune is coming out, so I'll be playing that with some buddies and whatnot. But if you have any builds or ideas or thoughts or things like that, leave them in the comments. I'll get to them, and we'll see if we can, flesh those ideas out. But with that being said, let's just jump right into this. The last one was pretty long, so I'm gonna just kind of front load everything and then go into details afterwards. So, in the interest of front loading, the character is a dual wield dagger style, right? I did add in bows for sniping and sort of tried to make the typical like Night Stalker or Midnight Blade type thing, right? The typical like sneak dagger type of person. Now, the unfortunate thing about that gameplay loop is that it's hard for it to work properly with or work the way you sort of want it to. You can't really sit in a bandit camp or take a bandit camp out systematically one by one like you can in other games, specifically because of I believe two reasons, and the first being that combat or sneak is great right off the bat, right? Obviously, if you crank the noise change, right, you can do a lot more sneaking in there, but that doesn't change like how fast you get detected, how long they look for you, or like what range you're visible at. And as far as I can tell, in this game, sneak is determined entirely by noise, right? Which is obviously like part of your gear. Plus, there's a formula there that does noise, right? But um, by line of sight, right? So like lighting isn't taken into effect. So like even if you're sitting in a dark corner, right? The moment that the enemy has a positive line of sight to you, right, or to like your center mass, right? Because sometimes I can sit in a recess, like behind a rock, and I can see just over the rock, and that's fine, right? And that creates some weird things because sometimes I can't shoot over the rock, but I can see over it, and then I like fire an arrow into a rock, and all of a sudden they start to investigate because like why did this thing happen, right? The noise kicks off, right? But because it's basically like, does the character have, or does the enemy have a direct line of sight, basically to like your chest, right? And if that answer is yes, right, then they see you, right? And the eyeball goes wide, right? It doesn't necessarily go entirely detected, right? Which doesn't mean that you get sneak, right? Because the moment they're alerted, you can't get sneak on them. You basically have to be in sneak, right? Or they have to be not alerted, right? So that sort of makes it so that it's difficult to get in melee range with a lot of these different dungeons, etc., because you can't like skirt the lighting and go through one of the, through a tunnel or through an area, etc. You have to be really um, creative with your moving in, right? And that gameplay sort of doesn't work out right. The second part is like when a character dies, regardless of noise, right? Like everything in the area or within that area is alerted. So if you do it in melee, right, you're basically found out instantly. You might be able to murk one guy out of a group, right? But after that, you've got to go get the rest of them. And even if you manage to stay out of sight, you're not getting another sneak attack because now they're all alerted rather than not knowing where you are. So you don't get the sneak, right? There is apparently some ways to do this with summons where you like you have a summon with you, right, and you beat them to it. You kill the one guy, they engage on the summon instead of you, so then you can sort of do it. But that wasn't the gameplay that I was trying to go for, and so in general, I think there needs to be some sort of small improvements, like whether that's reduces the time. I think the way they have it set up now could work if like the stealth tree had points to reduce your visibility range. Well, so and maybe it created a delay on kill before before enemies were alerted, right? So like that would create sort of like you can kind of like go, pick out your targets and mark them one to one by one if you can do A, enough damage to one shot, and then B, right, you can take them out silently in order to move to the next one. This also applies to ranged, right? So like when you do ranged, it's hilarious because like maybe you one shot kill somebody, right? But the group there is all sort of like there. They detect, right, from the death of the enemy, right? Everybody else gets detected, and then they know where that ability came from, where you were, right? So they, instead of searching the body and being sort of like human behavior, like, oh my gosh, what happened, and moving towards the body and trying to figure that out and looking around, right? And you being able to sort of maintain stealth that way, so similar to the way Skyrim sort of does it, um, they know exactly where that came from. So they start bolting right towards it, right? And you have to basically just back up and get out of the way. Now this sort of works with Stealth Archer because you can just get out, right? Wait for it to go, everything to cool off, and then you can go back in, one shot another person, and just repeat this process over and over and over again. But you then have a different function for mobs and or like boss fights that I haven't played around with the bows yet. So the way I did it, in the interest of upfront, right? We'll do this super quick. Is my gearing was as follows. I took in Act 1, I picked up the Swift Dagger, and then eventually the Parrying Dagger, right? Other than that, it was red cap daggers. So I used regular daggers coming out of the asylum, went to red cap daggers, then went swift to parrying. In Act 2, I picked up Smuggler's Knife and the Penny Buns Vanquisher for poison application. Had some burning stuff available, and I kept the wolf's fangs for the sneak damage multipliers for a while. They sort of just hang out in my, I think, 4 tab. I haven't upgraded them or used them basically in the last half of Act 2. And then eventually, once you get enough word deer antlers, right? This is the target is to get to the Stag's Well. Now maybe there's some better daggers out there. Even the smugglers and the vanquishers of Penny Buns probably could work if you upgraded them, right? I find that there's just a kind of a lack of daggers. Right, like there's a decent enough amount in like Act 1 to sort of like get you through, but like they're all sort of gimmicky, weird, right? The Swift Dagger at least has a decent mechanic, right? The Smuggling Dagger has a nice, decent mechanic, but for the most part, like Penny Buns with Mushroom Potency, the sneak damage on Wolf's Fang would be good, but the base damage is low, and like upgrading these things, it would be costly. A parrying dagger, right? Like I think there's another one that does chill, right? So there are some options, but there's not like the crazy options like that sort of fit the dagger playstyle, if you ask me, right? Like where's the ones with crit chance and crit damage. This one's crit damage per dash counter, right? If I'm running around with a warmth blanket and an extra one in my thing in light, right? I've got 5. That's 125% increase to crit damage. That's solid, assuming that I'm not using my dash, but you dash basically all the time in the combat. So this is good for the initial hit, and then eventually just slowly falls off throughout the fight. Whereas these, right, the reason I'm using the Stag's Woes that I crafted and upgraded is because the base damage on these is 20, right? The base damage on the other ones is 15 to 18, right? 10 to 13, right? And these were functional. It just took a while, right? Once you get a weapon that's 20 plus damage, right, you can you just scale so much better, right? And so like this is where I've landed, right? Is basically on Stacks Woe because it's less important for me to get sneak attacks, right? Because I'll take them when I can, but typically the fight loop is basically I'm going to stab one guy, he's going to die, and then the rest of them I will have to fight as if I was just a dual wield warrior. I'm going to have to dance in and out, going to have to smack them, etc., etc. So with that being said, the quick and dirty is the stats, right? I went 15, 15, 10, and then 3 practicality, and then as much perception as possible till you get to about 100 crit chance naturally, right? And this is just that's basically what you're going for. I've got 82, but I also have skills that allow me to basically get to 100, so I'm technically overcapping on a long fight. But I effectively want to get this to 100 flat. The reason I went 15 strength and 15 endurance is so that I could use the Lancelot gear for the physical damage should I need to, right? If you don't want to use that in any way, shape, or form, then you can sacrifice some of these. It does mean that you'll have a harder time with some of your weight requirements for gear, but by all means, right? However you want. I think the perception skills are the most important because you get so much extra like crit damage at 5%. All right, so when you compare that to strength, this is just 1% flat, right? And so this doesn't do you as much good as this, right? Because if I'm at 50% crit, this effectively gives me 2.5% increase in damage. So 1 point here, if I'm at 50% crit with 1 point, right, or 1 point of perception is basically 2 points of strength in general, or 2.5. So that's what I did. 15, 15, 10 dex for gear requirements, and then 3 practicality, again gear requirements for the cape I think, and then perception is the rest. As for skill trees, here's the basics of what I've got. Nothing in endurance. Dexterity got here, haven't picked up any extra attack speed. Perception, we came through here, got the sneak stuff, got the dagger stuff, and then the crit tree. And then practicality, we picked up these. Nothing in Red Death, so if you wanted to, like this build actually becomes super tanky if you just take the Red Death like survival tree, right? You take all 3 of these and this, right? You get basically another cheat death in the way that it's set up, and then you can get some more stacking damage out of this side of the tree. So it can scale, right? Like it basically goes up from here, depending on points. But obviously, I'm at 55. Usually, I'm somewhere around 69 or to 70 when I make one of these videos. But with Dune coming out, I'm pushing this out a little faster. And then as for King Soul, there's this one. I take the fully charged, right? This is the cheat death from the King Soul. You don't have to have this if you don't like it. I like to get the damage. Dealing damage has a chance to give you more restoration for the King Soul. That's generally my favorite there. You could also do like deflex incoming projectiles, but I don't find myself having problems with projectiles in general, so I just generally never pick this. I don't think there's anything better than the 400% finisher, 400% more King Soul on finishers. That basically means that every time I'm killing enemies and critting them at the end and stuff like that, right? I'm just acquiring more and more King Soul over and over and over again. So this basically makes it so like with these two, the way I have it set up, this can go off automatically, or I can kick it off whenever I want, and then it recharges fairly decently, right? Fairly fast. And then the last one basically makes the enemies take an additional whatever damage that I did to them during my King Soul function. They take it again at the end. So that's the other setup. I think the last one that I take, the last one I take is in the helm, right, which ends up being the 50% increase in damage while you have King Soul active. The reason I take that is because I can really lay into something with King Soul active, and then it takes all that damage a second time. So those two synergize really well. This one synergizes with getting it back faster. So does this one, right? But on this character specifically, because I was dancing in and out, and it's a little tougher the way he was set up. With light gear and like not being super tanky and trying to do the like in and outs of assassinating, I decided to go with the cheat death function. Yeah, so if that's all you were here for, right? That's all we need. The gear I basically used. So this is sort of like the end game function where I was at. The duelist gloves, the duelist cape, Lancelot chest, and then fledgling boots, breeches, and mask. Right. This gives me crit, crit, crit. Crit neck, crit ring, a 25% increase in damage while dual wielding, and then crit and stamina regen on the cape, and then physical damage on these two pieces. Awesome. Now, to explain sort of all of that, um, power bow is pretty straightforward. It pierces. It's more because of the bow just does a crazy amount of damage. We gave it a bunch of stuff there. These life transfusions I keep on me all the time because I hate the little ghost heads. Right? Anytime I find the ghost heads, I use life transfusion to kill them because they have really, really low health. But the channeling version of this cast tracks them, so I can just point at them and track them and kill them, right? So that's why I put these on here. The Wolf's Fang, these come from Silent Cilia in Act 1. They are monstrously good, but that's a difficult task to do early. So, like I said, I picked up the Swift Dagger out of the graveyard, and then eventually Pairing Dagger. I forget where, right? Yeah, but after you have the Swift Dagger, you can probably do Silent Cilia. Just sort of depends on what your gameplay loop looks like and whether or not you've got Cole's Neck and so on, right? In Act 2, the Smuggler's Knife with the Swift Dagger is actually really, really good. Right? It basically makes it so that when you dash, you get extra damage, and then when you're not dashing, you're getting extra damage. So they pair pretty well. I used that combo for a while up until I decided that I wanted to do some status stuff, which I think I should have showed all that, right? So like here, 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 and here. Yeah. So until I want to get into this status function where I'm deep like putting a status on an enemy debuffs them, right, and makes them take more damage. Until I get to that point, I don't really need the Penny Buns Dagger here, right? Because it's applying the poison. Additionally, because I am at that point now, I have placed the Burning Stone in both of my daggers so that both of them have, since attacks alternate between one weapon to the other, right? If you only had it in one, it makes the build up take longer. So having the burning status in both of them, right, allows me to build that effect or status effect faster. Let's see. What else here? Basically, the way I set this up was which is difficult, right? It is a more difficult scenario because you are focusing on sneak damage, right? And if you go early into perception instead of into like one-handed and getting flat damage, stuff like that, right? You don't do as much, right? You're basically trying to sneak attack something and get it to murder it out of nowhere, and then fight the rest of them afterwards, which it works, but like when you get to boss fights like Galahad and stuff like that, that's a really big task comparatively, right? Like if you had just done a dual wield thing where you were in the one-handed tree, you wouldn't have that problem as much. So I went with the sneak stuff, right? Up until I got to the Children of a Morgan, which allowed me to swap out the. You can either do I think it's a thief's collar or whatever it is. That gives you 3% crit. Then you can get the fledgling, not the fledgling one, the one before this, right from them. It's a crow's face or whatever it is, or crow's cowl, right? That's 4% crit. I eventually swapped it out with the fledgling mask, right? As that storyline progressed, giving me extra crit damage and attack speed was solid, right? And so I appreciate that. The duelist gloves, right, or dual knight gloves, you can get these in Act 1. It is tough. I kill him with spells, right? I couldn't kill him because of his reflect damage. I couldn't do it with physical. You'd have to heal somehow and have a whole bunch of like wait time, downtime, and I didn't want to do that. But before this, right, I went from sneak gloves, right, from Silent Cilia or the Assassin's Glove set, into the Crow set, which eventually went into the Fledgling set, which eventually gave way to the dual knight gloves when I finally did my respec for crafting, made a bunch of money, and I was able to reduce the weight far enough to make this happen. The same thing sort of happens with the chest plate, right? I used the assassin to Crow to fledgling to throwing in Sir Lancelot. This does keep me. I am keeping myself in the light category for armor, which is decent, right? It does come with, speed multipliers, right? I think this 20% applies to all of these things ahead of it, right? Maybe it doesn't, right? So mana regen, stam regen, attack speed, casting, all that movement speed by 20 plus dash counter at 3. So I think this is 20% multiplier to all of these things, right? If not, then medium's just for superior, and arguably medium superior either way. But we'll get into that. Actually, I can just explain that now. The reason for that is because when I'm running around, right, this is my sprint, which makes me fast. But by sprinting, right, so like when I get into combat, for some reason, I'm always doing dash attacks, right, which can even to the side, right? So it just gets to be like when I'm in a combat scenario like this. Let's get into this Mistbearer, right, or Brimshade. I smack him. Everything's even going sideways. It's trying to everything. As long as I have a movement held, right, it's always trying to do this two-handed attack, right? Now the two-handed attack does a metric ton of damage. It's great, right? So it's a good ability. Now the problem is it's difficult to land, right? And so like if you're fighting something that's semi-static or not moving, all of a sudden you're missing all the time because you're dashing by it, and then when you dash by it, it hits you in the back and just destroys your health bar, right? And so that's one of the reasons why the Red Death 3 with the cap for percentage on your health taken per hit could be, really, really good, and it could allow you to sort of like hang out there. But if the moment you go into movement speed, because my understanding from the research that I could find or is available, since this game is pretty fresh, right, is that something to do with being in light armor and having the extra movement speed, right, in combat, is making it so that it thinks you're sprinting based off of the speed at which you're moving, right? And since it thinks you're sprinting, it gives you the sprinting attack, and that's what's creating that, right? So all of a sudden you're just doing this all the time, right? And it's not particularly good. So with that, it might be worth, if you can handle that, or you're not worried about that, or you're using different weapons and you like their animations, right, and you're able to deal with that well, then this is by far the best, right? Like you get extra dash, you're much more speedy, you're much more faster to attack and regen all your resources. Like it's just great, right? If not, and that's a pain in the keister for you, just let this bump into medium, right? Don't weight reduce these gloves as far. Don't weight reduce the pieces. To get into light, stay in medium, which arguably also gives you a lot more freedom on gear earlier, because when you don't have a lot of strength, because you're able to, just play in this extra bit of weight basically. So I think medium will probably end up being the better option just in general. So do with that information what you will. Yeah, so Helm, we went Assassin to Crow to Fledgling. I'm keeping the Fledgling for now. Maybe go to either a Lancelot or to a Ravenous or something like that. Same thing with the chest. I think you can get to Ravenous, but ironically, the chest on Lancelot um, is great, right? Like it's 30% physical. The crit isn't really what we're after, it's just the physical. But there's not really other chests, right? Like even the Revenant is only 20. But the problem with the crafted Revenant is that if you upgrade it, same problem here, right? But if you upgrade the Revenant, it's at 20 and 20, right? So it's 20 flat 20 melee damage and 20 to weak spot damage. Now we're not specifically doing weak spot, so that would just be a random add 2 damage when it happened for weak spot function. But the 20 melee damage is 10% less than Lancelot's 30 physical. Since we're basically doing all physical, and the only reason we're putting debuffs on something is to be able to do more physical because it's taking more damage. So Lancelot's is just 10% extra damage comparatively, right? And arguably the weak spot 20% is probably going to factor in less than that extra 10%. So Lancelot's just wins outright, and then you get an extra crit when you finally get low health, right? Which, and our crits heal us, so that's sort of like using this earlier with in a medium armor setup would be just fine, and it wouldn't hurt too bad. And then we have 3 blood tainted shells. There are 3 of them you can acquire in Act 1. The first one is near Seawall's tomb. There's 2 statues that are next to it. On the left one, you have to sort of like go around or go up the towers and whatnot and get up there, right? But on his arm, there's one, and then there's another one you get another one from the Blood Abomination in below the Blood Lake. And then you get another one if you go to the Mistweaver. And if you go to the Mistweaver area, you get to fight a second Blood Abomination that gives you your third. So the only things that I've done is put 3 of those on there, so every time I kill something I get 30 health back, and then multiplied my stamina regen by a 1.2, right, which is great when I have the dual Night Cape, which is giving me 25 stamina regen per second. Now, the reason that the dual Night Cape and the dual Night Gloves are preferred in these slots is because they scale, right? The Lancelot gear, if you upgrade it, all that upgrades is the armor. The armor just gets better. The effect doesn't change, right? I've taken these to like plus 17, right, in testing, and nothing happens. But on the dual Night Gloves, that's not true, right? So the dual Night Glove here, or cape here, gets like 1% crit and I think 1 stamina regen per second every upgrade, right? And it's similarly, I don't think you get any more extra stamina, but you do get more melee damage by 1% per upgrade, right? And these are obtainable in Act 1, which is impressive, given that typically Act 1 gear doesn't upgrade as well as Act 2 gear, right? So this is nice. Maybe I haven't I haven't killed the other 2 Void Knights from in this playthrough, right? So I haven't been able to compare their gear. Maybe their slots are better in this case, right? But so just sort of watch for those, right? There may be upgrades, right? Things that I'm specifically looking for decent upgrades or upgrades later in the game. Later in the game would be the legs and the boots. I know there's a set that you can make that makes 15% physical damage boots, right? That'd be okay. However, if you're going to do that, Lancelot's boots have 15% physical damage, so you wouldn't have to, right? You would only go after those other ones if the weight made sense. But if you have the gold, right, to weight reduce it, then you're probably just going to use Lancelot boots, unless somebody finds a set of boots that can scale. These fledgling ones do not scale. Similarly to the Lancelot thing, doesn't matter how many times you upgrade the fledgling boots or breeches, right? These percentages don't change, right? So 15% is all the more you get out of the breeches, and 10% is all you get out of the boots. But combined, they're 25% crit, so that's helping with my crit get to, what was it, 73, 82%, right? That is solid. Like they're a quarter of that, basically. A little more than a quarter. Um, and then I'm using the Stone Warden Talisman at 15%. This is crafted from the Stone Warden's quest. And then I picked up the Swordsman Amulet, which gives me increase in physical damage or just flat damage while dual wielding. This is my favorite weapon, ring for dual wield function, and then still using the Perilous Orb from Act 1 because it has 7% crit on it, right? And I don't really know if there's a better ring, right? Like you can make arguments for like the Blood Ring to apply the bleeding effect early, right? Or also to just sort of like, since you are running a dagger, right? And you could apply the debuff pretty quickly, right? Since the Blood Ring makes it so that you apply bleed every time you hit. That's possible if you wanted to run sort of like a bleed setup, bleed build. You could probably argue that, and then you would go into the status tree a lot faster. And then, yeah, the dual Night Cape, right? So I think that's all the gear. And then we'll go over sort of like the Lancelot gear requires the 15 strength, 15 endurance. 15 endurance is never really terrible because of the 255 carry weight. You'd eventually get to like I think 305 or so once there's get all your druid shrines and stuff like that for there's one for encumbrance. So that would be just fine for carry weight, especially if you're, hoarding gear or whatnot and dropping it off, right, or selling it. The 15 strength is always great for a melee build because this is what determines the damage or melee damage even on daggers. Dexterity doesn't apply against daggers. It does apply against bows at the 1% that happens, right? But the bigger reason for dexterity is the attack speed. But even then, most of the attack speed we get is out of the tree, out of the skill tree. So really, the only reason if I'm playing any build that's not a bow build, right? Not a bow centric, bow specific. Like if bow's my primary, then I'm probably cranking dexterity. But if bow's not my primary function or not my primary damage dealer, right? I'm basically only using enough dexterity to meet the requirements for whatever gear that I'm trying to get or use. And then practicality, similar, right? Only a gear requirement thing. If whatever I was using at the time didn't need the practicality, I wouldn't have these points, right? They would just be in perception, right? And then perception is like I said earlier, it's the best tree, right? It's the best point increase for damage, especially when we are sneaking, right? Because we're getting +8, so we get almost 600 sneak damage, right? And then there's a bunch of bonuses in the skill tree that also crank that damage up higher. We get crit chance, which is why we're investing so heavily in it, even with all of the gear, right? So like we've basically got crit on our boots, crit on our chests or our legs, one ring, a neck, and our cape. And so we have like 5 pieces with crit on it, and we also have most our points in perception, and we're still only at 82%, right? So we do have some crit out of functions in the tree, which allow us to overcap, which basically means after about 3 to 5 swings, we're at the cap and we're at 100% crit, and then we're moving from there. But like once we get to the point of where we can get to 100% crit, we could potentially respec and save some of those points and move them to other places. So I think perception's just point for point the best to invest in, and then since it also happens to be just sort of the best for what we were doing, right, with sneak and stuff like that anyway, this is what you're going to invest in for the most part, right? Like the rest of this playthrough will all be perception, without a doubt, right? Because that's where all the damage is, right? Even if I get to 100% crit, right, and this starts being like 120, right, and this starts being useless, it's just gonna free up some other points in the skill tree and let it over crit, right? Because this crit damage is more damage at 100% crit than this melee damage or arguably this attack speed. So um, as for skills, I already kind of covered the King's Soul, so you get that's good. Um, skills, this has a lot of potential to move upwards from here, right? Like I think I've got basically all the functionality pieces that I want, and so for now or for the next foreseeable pieces that I would be investing into would be this would be 5% per point, so 10% more physical damage here, and then 5% per point here, which is 20. So I have like 30% increased physical damage in the next 6 points, right, to pick up out of this tree. I'm not particularly worried about being low health because I'm basically either if I'm getting to low health, something's wrong. Um, the same thing here, and then increasing damage per missing physical health doesn't do me any good if I'm lifestealing and staying topped up anyway. Physical damage for weight of weapons. I'm using daggers. This point basically only probably applies to somebody using a two-hander, right? Because the weight on weapons is actually pretty low, right? Like a gladius, right, is barely a pound. Like that'd be what if two gladiuses would be 4% increase in damage. Now, if you had a 5 pound weapon, then it's 10%. Okay, right? So but none of the weapons are going to be 5 pounds outside of like some sort of like two-hander or two-handed maul or something. So I don't. That's how I set that tree up. The reason I do this is so that when I do stagger somebody, I get a 60% increased damage to them during the window that they are staggered. Uh, on the one-handed tree, obviously we want to push farther into here. I don't think that these points are necessary to get first because I'm looking for function over raw damage, right? The getting the raw damage would actually help for some fights, right? So like since I'm at 83% crit naturally, and I have this ability, right, which slow scales an extra 20% crit, I get to 103. This takes 10 strikes though, right? So in 10 strikes, I get to 103% chance to crit. I could, in theory, remove this stacking crit of 15%, but this only takes five hits to get to. So I got these points a lot earlier because this is the more effective point spend for increasing your crit. The problem, and I wouldn't have this point if I wasn't going to eventually, get these points, right? This is a prereq point for this, right? And then while your crit is low, having those two means that on a lengthy fight, I'm basically getting 35% increased crit anyway, right? If I'm all sitting at like 22 from Act 1 already, right, I'm looking at an easy 50% crit. I'm already at 50% crit before I leave Act 1, right? So that's a really good point to be at when you're in those early stages. And so these just give you a bunch of scaling crit and allows the crit function, the crit lifesteal, to sort of like help you out. Now the lifesteal on daggers is pretty low because you're not doing a monstrous amount of damage. So you sort of want to either be doing the double swing for more damage on your thing, but you will sort of want to dance and still make sure that you're not taking a bunch of hits. You can't just sit there and tank for a while. Um, I get this as a pre point. You could potentially um, get it as a more impactful point if you're using the powerful blows to drain the stamina of the enemy. Um, but I think again, I think this is probably more suited for um, larger damage weapons. Now, that's not to say that they're useless because um, this does it either does apply to the backstab, right? And the backstab already drains a bunch of stamina, but it also does a metric ton more damage. So, like, if you do get to sneak up on a boss or a boss type enemy or something like that, and you get the backstab on them, right? With this point investment to have 15% of the damage be from heavy attacks and one-handeds, right? Like you, whether they'll pop for the stamina, and then even if they don't go down, like their stamina will be pretty low, and that because you'll take 80% of the way, and then you can do a power attack follow up to force stagger the enemy, right? So in theory, you could backstab into a power attack. They've force staggered you, King Soul, and you beat them up, right, with as many attacks as possible, weaving in power attacks maybe, like however your DPS rotation is, right, and then when your King Soul pops off, they take that damage again, and now you've done a giant load to front load your damage. And then with that, of course, comes we are dual daggering it, so we get the symmetric combat for extra attack speed. This build attacks so stupid fast. Um, and we don't even have the attack speed out of like dexterity, no on kill attack speed, no consecutive attack speed, right? Like it could get worse. Right, for in the attack speed arena it could get faster. Nothing spirituality, dexterity, we only go for the movement here. Eventually you might take the dashes regenerate faster. That's a pretty decent node. I don't think you need the less stamina because we have no problems with stamina either in combat or out of combat. And then perception is the big tree. Right, so we'll tackle that in a second. Practicality, we are acquiring status effects, right? So basically, when they are afflicted by one status effect, they take 30% more damage. When they are afflicted by two, they take an additional 30% more damage. And then when they are afflicted by one, the other one or any other affliction is 50% easier or faster to apply. So this couples with basically with our perception, we are 50% chance on any crit. Again, we should be operating at 100% crit, so 50% of our swings should apply a bleed, right? Which means that it's going to continuously stack, and then utilizing that bleed, or once it's bled, the burning condition that is on each of our weapons becomes more effective, right? And because it becomes more effective, we're faster at getting the second affliction on there, which then makes them take more damage, right? So that's how that's set up, or synergize anyway. I did not take Swift and Fierce. I have taken Swift and Fierce, but I was trying to do a test where I don't take it, so that I could see whether or not it was this point that was making me do those power attacks constantly in battle, and it turns out that that's not it, right? So by all means take this whenever you feel like it, right? It is nice to get that extra attack speed and be able to move around, but arguably we're moving around all the time anyway, right? At a pretty good rate. I don't feel like the build's slow. And then we restore on crits, max that out to 40%. Because we want to do that as often as possible. This is our only natural stamina regen. If we ever go out of stamina, right, we can basically just keep attacking and praying that this manages to refill. And the moment it refills, we come basically instantly out of being the slow what overexerted stage. Um, Critical Aegis, this makes us a little bit more tanky. Um, that's about all it does. And then Bloodthirst, this makes us more tanky by refilling our health bar by 4% of the damage we deal. And since we deal a pretty decent amount of damage now with the the stag, whatever daggers, from the word deer antlers, then we do enough damage to actually sustain our life pool through most fights. And like I said, if you got if you got 3 points all 3 points in this, you can never take more than 25% of your health in a single strike. And with most enemies, that's enough to just sort of like stand in front of them, tank them, and just spam your abilities, right? So you could get these 3 points, get this one. If you got this one, you'd have cheat death out of perception. You'd have cheat death out of King Soul. You'd have cheat death out of Red Death, right? And so like you'd have 3 different ways that basically whenever you hit 0, you just didn't die. So it would become tanky that way, along with like anytime you do cheat death, you can't take over a certain amount, and you're always healing a metric ton back. So like it can sort of like build into tanky function. On the perception tree, we take the Silent Hunter, we take the Cheat Death here, and then we take the sneak damage and the stun. Now, we don't get any of the rest of this, right? Because we don't need sneak damage increasing based off of enemies that are around, because, like I said at the beginning of the video, once we're engaged, we're basically just always in, right? We can maybe like this would maybe help with us to one-shot a single enemy, but it's not helping us after that because we're not getting a sneak attack out on a second enemy, right? Without running away, getting a reset somehow, and then going back. At which point, this point is null and void, right? And then Cheater's Gambit. This could potentially be really, really good, especially if you were utilizing the blind bow. I could see that being a thing, right? The hard part I have here is it basically only synergizes with either the sand thing, which I haven't found. I don't think I found a recipe for, so I can't really like make my own sand. I don't have abilities that I've found that blind, and there's really only that one bow that blinds, right? So it doesn't synergize with anything crazy. It'd be awesome if like instead of stun here, right, we got blind, right? Imagine that like sneak attacks blind enemies, right? And then the blinded enemies always get critically struck, right? So like in that case, right, we would be able to do that if you combine that with being able to like sort of stay inside of sneak or be able to get in and out, maybe like a vanish button, right? Being able to do that would be pretty cool, right? We get in, we sneak, we blind, we pop something, we vanish, we get in, we sneak, we blind, right? That would be cool. I'd love a vanish in this game, right? That for limited amount of seconds and on a decent like 15-20 second cooldown. That would be amazing. But we don't have that, so this doesn't really synergize with a whole bunch of things. Just the one bow. If you are going to use that bow, by all means take this. Like that would, I could see that being pretty powerful. At least at least in mobbing, maybe not against bosses. I decided not to go into the noise reductions. As I said, noise reduction does not change them being able to like spot you or being able to hear their buddy die or anything like that. It doesn't. It basically only means that you're better at getting to the side of an enemy that's not looking at you. So if that enemy has a decently high perception where they can hear or see for whatever reason, or like your dash or jump, excuse me, or something like that, then this point would make sense. But since those enemies are fewer and far between, right, and line of sight is more important, even with 20 stealth, right, once your character gets far enough into stealth, right, this This is just fine, right? I basically anything that I can get to the back or see the back of, I can get and I can get behind it, right? Doesn't know I'm there until I've killed them. And then the last bit is the actual dagger tree. Now we actually take a whole bunch out of here. And the reason for that is I want my daggers to always crit on the backstab. Now, once I have 100% crit, I can take 2 points out of here. Right? Ideally, I could take 3, but it's the first point in the tree, so I can only take 2. The lingering afflictions makes it so that our status buildup is more effective if we're using our daggers, right? This combined with the practicality tree that makes these more effective once one's applied, right, means that we are more likely to apply these bleed effects. We are more likely to apply the ignite effects, right? And then our crits basically do them at 50%. So at 100% crit, we're 50. Every other strike, we're applying a bleed, which is then making it so that we're 50% more likely to apply another status effect. We're also 1.5 times more likely to apply a status effect already. So this sort of stacks to where we get is we're basically creating this like we're going to get to 2 effects on an enemy as quickly as possible. Now, normal mobs probably never going to get it, right? Maybe on the shield block Camelosians or something like that, something that's shield blocking, you might get enough taps in to be able to build that up. But for the most part, things just die before that happens. Serpent Swiftness, this is just free attack speed as long as you have a single dagger equipped. In fact, it's possible that you might do some Skyrim style thing where instead of getting on a natural, maybe on like a regular dual wield, like let's say you wanted to use a different weapon, right? You could potentially, instead of getting this asymmetric combat for 21%, you could get adaptive combat, which gives you just 20% flat physical, as long as there's 2 different types. So let's say you're using a big old axe or something like that, and then you put a dagger in your offhand, right? Those would be 2 different types, or maybe it's a sword in your offhand, right? But as long as it's a dagger in your secondary hand, right, and you have Serpent Swiftness, you get 20% attack speed right out of here. So it's possible that if you wanted to use that to get 20%, you might use these 4 points to get 21% attack speed. And then that additionally would increase the crit damage you have, because this is also whenever you have a dagger equipped, not specifically when you have 2. So this basically makes it so that you get more crit damage, which is always great, especially anytime you're investing in the crit tree. So we've got increased crit and crit damage and attack speed. Then we've got status buildup, and lastly we have what we're the cream de la creme, right? The cream of the crop here is the increased backstab by 300% for each equipped dagger. Since we're dual wielding daggers, that should be 600% on top of the fact that we have like 600% increase to our sneak attack, right, and so on and so forth. So this is just a monstrous piece. Now the problem here is that in veteran, right, until if you're still using like lower daggers, or you haven't upgraded your daggers, or you don't have a high base damage, even though you have this giant amount of multipliers to make your damage go crazy, right? Like it's guaranteed to crit, right? It's guaranteed to have 85% increase in the sneak, right? It's got all of your sneak damage from your perception. It's got crit damage, so it's always going to crit, so it's always going to have this 50% plus anything else that you've accumulated through the tree, right? Along with your cranking perception, so that's giving you increase to crit, right? So like this should be the biggest damaging hit you can probably ever get, right? And it's still not going to one-shot most things. You'll one-shot peasants, you'll one-shot like trash, right? But like a poison knight, right? Like until you have upgraded weapons, you're not one-shotting that, right? A Camelosian knight with a shield, right? Even now, I don't think I can one-shot it, even with my stag daggers, right, at +4. I would have to hit it once and then probably smack it 1 or 2 times. It'll be close. It'll be smack 1 or 2 times. Now, the 80% drain of stamina, I use this because, in my opinion, it's happening in conjunction with the other. Because one of the things that I've found is that when I backstab, it seems like a backstab is technically a power attack. Because by the way this is worded, it should only take 80% of their stamina, and then I should have to power attack right behind it. In practice, and in my gameplay that I have seen, when I backstab somebody and I only have one of these, that's how that works, right? They'll have an amount of their stamina left over, right? That I need to either parry to get them to stagger, or I need to power attack to get them to stagger. When I went to 80%, that changed, and basically, like, the moment I stabbed them, they staggered, and I instantly went into, right, being able to do damage that way. So I think that the 80% stamina removal, in conjunction with the 15% damage to stamina from power attacks, actually makes it so that backstabs do both of those functions, which causes basically instant stagger on that character, which means you are virtually guaranteed to just obliterate the single target that you get the jump on, right? Which is generally, obviously, not bosses. My KVM has decided to talk to me. All right, now we can go back. So that should be all of this. Red Death obviously is a fantastic tree. I try to avoid it in making any of these builds because I want them to work without it. Any of the builds is actually just going to go through the roof, right? This is the most survivable thing, like, tree that you can get, whether it's two-handed, right, with lifesteal in the two-handed tree, any one-handed build with lifesteal out of crits. If you're running on medicine, right, like, you can, like, this gives you that buffer time to be able to take your potions and stuff like that. It is just absolutely insane. And then with this being a scaling thing, like, having this tree alone, just filling this tree out, gives you 200% damage increase, right? Now this is from taking damage, but then you come in here and all of a sudden it's like, let's do it from here, right? Give ourselves 75% chance when we do damage to increase that, or to increase these stacks, right? Which means that we're getting to the cap faster, which means we're getting to that 200% damage increase. So it just sort of gets really, really kind of silly. This is just the craziest scaling tree. It's amazing, right? So any build that I can think of benefits from this tree, benefits from these functions. So use them however you want and go into this tree whenever you want. But when I make a build, I try to avoid this tree because it is so broken. And I want the things that I do to work on the hardest difficulty without this tree, so that you can play them at any difficulty and you can add this tree and just make them better. Alright, I think that's all of it. Future things for the build, obviously, fill out this, that gives us all of our extra damage, right? So that's the next 1 to 6 points, right? And then these 4 points give us the extra crit damage, right? And that finishes out all of the crit damage. Since these 2 points don't make a difference, right? If you want the movement speed, pick those 2 up. Right, so now you're at 6, 10, 11, 12, right? And then dexterity, probably get these 2 points for the regeneration, right? So you're looking at 14, that gets us right to 69, and that is all combat, right? Now, maybe you want to, you can, if you're playing not on Master or not on Veteran, right? And you want to put into practicality for crafting, that's fantastic. If you are playing Veteran, I think you want all of your combat points to be combat points. And what I do is I basically save all the gear that I pick up and I throw it in my storage chest. And then at some point in Act 2, whenever I have acquired the items that I specifically want for maybe the end game or something like that, that's when I finally do a respec. I go into practicality, I go full into practicality, get a whole bunch in this tree, do as much crafting with as much materials as I've acquired, and then also with the other things, and then do all my selling and get as much gold as possible. So that the only limiting factor is, do I have the materials that I want, and can I buy them, or can I buy them? Even then, right, like if I was to try and like crank this up, right? Like I can only take with this 427,000 gold, I can only take one item to like plus 17. If I take one item to plus 15, right, I don't have the gold to take a second item to plus 15. So it gets really expensive really fast, and to that point, right, like none of this gear is actually upgraded, right? It's weight reduced. Some of it is weight reduced, right, to stay in the light category with the strength, right? And you'll have to play with how much strength you have versus how much weight. But I think that the end result of this test is effectively that medium armor is just better, right? Even though it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be 20% slower on its attack speed, right? Not power attacking, or like, yeah, not jump attacking or sprint attacking every time you click the left mouse button, right? So your character sort of does exactly what you want it to, I think is way more important. So if they ever get that fixed to where that's not a problem anymore, then light armor will be absolutely absolute king for attack speed builds and stuff like that. And I think this is sort of the setup you would do, and you'd probably want to do some more weight reduction on some of these pieces, like the Lancelot armor, or a different chest piece if you're using that, depending on what gear you put in these slots. And that should be all of it, right? Another note that I haven't put into the other things is that you can eventually get some pretty good potions. I think you can eventually make a potion that is plus 80 health, right? But I don't remember if I have come across that, right? The great health potion is over here at, a big old 50. Yet if you do the quest in the horns, in the keep, with the alchemist, right? If you do, or the keeper outside of the alchemist who wants to have his mom's tooth remedy, if you do that quest, then you get the toothache remedy, which starts at a base of 80 health. It's literally, ironically, it is the best health potion I've found, right? Unless there is a medical journal that I haven't found that allows you to craft an 80 health potion, you get the best health potion in the game, right off the bat in the first town. So this is, and it's carnation, right? Sage and whatever alcohol. So it is. It's really simple to make. It's easy to remember, right? It's fairly abundant. Basically, everybody's got carnations, and they're just the little red things on the ground. Now, for gameplay, let's go see if we can find a mob. I showed you the Brimshade and chasing. Here is a bear in the third act. I can just stand here, and as long as I can hit him, right, like my health is going to be just fine, right? Now if he stunned me, that would be a problem, right? I'd have to dodge out of that and then come back. Here's some guys that they're aware of my presence. These are the Sven guys that you're supposed to talk to. We'll do that, and then we'll be like, yeah, we're not gonna do that, no chance. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna die. I'm just gonna stand here because I don't want to do the power attacks, and I'm gonna just kill you. There you go. That's both of them. That's the brain we were after. Iron arrows. Okay. And then let's see if we can do some sneak stuff on those guys. I don't know if I can make that. When I hop over, they're gonna be mad.
Keep your wits about ya. Keep your wits about ya.
Yep. So that's the rough part, is like the jumping made some sort of amount of noise that made them move. Right? And like, even if I were to attack this guy, right? He's searching for me.
You'll regret this.
Yeah. And now he sees me, right? Like, I would have expected to be seen that way anyway. But like,
We'll make
I wouldn't
something
have
of you.
done any extra damage. There we go. Okay. Oh, Dalrata armor is actually pretty decently valuable. It's like 250, I think. Now I did make weird bone arrows, so this guy's just gonna disappear. Bonk. But as you can see, like right off the bat, right, that those guys went eyeball, right? So right at the top of your head. Okay. Now I don't get sneak there. Okay. Come on.
This is my lucky day.
Now the attack, right? The dual wield lunge attack is a monstrous amount of damage. That was pretty good timing.
Short work of you.
Yeah. So we just got into, Act 3 here, and we are, like I just 3-shot that guy. Let's see. This guy's here. We'll use some third party to see if he's looking at us. See if he ever turns around. Nope, I'm not patient enough.
Keep your wits about ya. Your road.
Not gonna get out of sneak so that I don't have to do lunge attacks.
You survived that. Ah,
Okay. Bandit armor. That's alright. Yeah. Let's see if we can find. Oh, hey. Resources. Now that's annoying. Is that a village? Oh, there's a brimshade. Now we won't be able to sneak up on the brimshade, but we should be able to sneak up on this guy here. There we go. And then I believe that guy's turned around. Okay, now he's not looking at us. So like, as you can see, right, like even though we have, what is it, 569% increased sneak damage, and then by dual wielding we have guaranteed crit, right? So we should also be getting our crit damage. Where's that at? 364, right? So that's like 900, just over 900%, 903% increase in damage, right? And then We also get the 300%, but for each dagger we have 2, that's 600. So we have 1500% increase in damage, and we have a 54 to 62, because the green is what the damage we would actually be doing. The 28 to 32 is the base damage of the weapon. So 54 to 62. So if we take that and we go 54 plus 62 divided by 2, our median is 58, and we multiply that by 100 plus 1500, which is 1600. And then divided by, yeah, so it's like 928 damage if you divided that by 100. So if you multiply it by 1600, what is that? No, it's 16. It's multiplied by 16. Yeah, so it's like 928 damage. Right, so 58 times 16 is, yeah, 928. So it's 928 damage off this one weapon, right? Off that one hit, right? And that didn't, that doesn't one-shot just an undead running around in here, right? So like, there's no way you're killing a boss like that, right? Now in normal, like story mode or any of the other modes, right? Sure, I bet that one-shots most things. But in veteran mode, it does not, right? Like, you're going to have to get the opener, you're going to have to get some damage in after the opener in order to kill things with daggers like this. So, and because of the way sneak function works, it basically just becomes a really fast attacking dual wield build that can also snipe, right? Because the sneak attack function from the perception tree, from the sneak function or sneak tree, allows you to basically also do these, right? So it might actually be something where you might not want to put into the 2 daggers, and you just invest into more of the bow, or you want to split it and do that, right? To each their own, whatever you enjoy the most. Oh, I'm bad. And we're gonna get this brim shade. Come on, big guy. There you go. There you go. And you're gone. Okay. So with that, I will cut the video off here. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll be playing Dune with some buddies and whatnot. But if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or other build ideas or concepts that you want to see happen, or like if you want to see a Let's Play of any of the builds that are on here, just let me know, and we'll see what we can get done. Thanks.